Imagine for a moment stepping into the shoes of those who came before us. Welcome to a journey that transforms history into vibrant stories that captivate and inspire. The air is thick with mist, and the sound of water gently trickling over ancient stone fills your ears. You step barefoot across smooth marble still warm from yesterday's heat. A thin veil of steam dances up from the surface of a rectangular pool before you clouding your vision just enough to blur time. Somewhere beyond the vapor, you hear the scrape of a strigil, a whisper of Latin, a cough, a splash. This isn't your typical spa day. You've just walked into a Roman bathhouse, and the experience is equal parts healing ritual social theater and architectural marvel. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, post your location and local time. I always love seeing where and when you listen in from. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stone beneath your feet is polished from generations of footsteps, senators and soldiers, poets and merchants, slaves and emperors. The bathhouse is still waking up. You catch the first sharp scent of eucalyptus as someone tosses herbs onto a brazier near the caldarium, the hot room. You can feel the pulse of the Hippocaust system deep beneath the floor, an invisible warmth spreading upward through a labyrinth of stone pillars and hollow spaces. The Romans knew how to make a place sweat, and they expected you to too. The healing powers of the Roman baths weren't just legend, they were marketed. You'd see inscriptions outside boasting of miraculous recoveries. Marcus, crippled for 3 years, walked again after one soak. Of course, Marcus was probably also bribed with free olives to say that. But that didn't matter, people believed. And belief, as you know, is a powerful medicine. You pass through an arched hallway into the apoditerium, the changing room. Niches in the walls are stuffed with togas, cloaks, and the occasional bronze mirror. A couple of young boys offer to watch your belongings for a few coins, though. If you value them, you'd better not trust anyone too much. The Romans invented the concept of the public locker room, and the public locker room theft. Now stripped of everything but your sandals, you enter the next chamber. The air is warmer. The sound of the fountains here is softer, more deliberate. This is where the magic begins. These baths were more than places to get clean. They were centers of public life. Temples to health, shrines to status, and sometimes, unfortunately, hotspots for gossip, fungus, and poor decisions. You'd sit in water infused with sulfur, iron, and calcium, the minerals absorbing through your skin, or so the theory went. Historians still argue whether the water had any actual medicinal effect, but to a Roman, the results spoke for themselves. Take the city of Aquae for example, the modern town of Bath in England. The Romans didn't just stumble upon hot springs and say, nice. They built temples. They dedicated the waters to Sulis Minerva, a hybrid goddess they Frankensteined together from Celtic and Roman mythology. It was part spirituality, part science, and 100% tourist trap. People flocked from across the empire to soak, to worship, and to whisper their hopes to the steam. Of course, the baths weren't just found in Britain. Across the empire, from Hispania to Syria, you'd find them. Some were massive complexes larger than football fields, adorned with mosaic floors, soaring domes, and intricate heating systems. Others were modest 2 rooms. One tub, maybe a reluctant attendant rubbing olive oil on your back. The Romans didn't invent public bathing, mind you. That honor might belong to the Greeks or even earlier cultures in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. But Rome perfected it, standardized it, industrialized it. Like most things they touched, They made it louder, bigger, and more likely to contain marble. One quirky detail: the baths were a great equalizer until they weren't. Technically, anyone could go man, woman, citizen, slave. But in practice, men bathed in the morning. Women were sometimes allowed in the afternoon. The wealthy had private hours. The emperor could shut the whole place down if he was feeling shy. And yes, there were separate entrances just to make sure no one had to share steam with the wrong class of person. You find your way to the caldarium, the hottest room in the building. It's humid enough to wilt a laurel wreath. Your skin prickles. You breathe deep and immediately regret it. The air tastes of salt smoke and something vaguely medicinal. Maybe thyme. Maybe mildew. It's hard to say. A broad man with oiled arms and a suspiciously smooth head greets you. He offers to scrub you down with a strigil, a curved metal blade used to scrape off sweat oil and sins. You hesitate. He insists. You now understand why some Romans preferred to bring their own slave for the job. You recline against a heated bench and let the warmth seep into your joints. This was the Roman equivalent of a hot yoga class minus the yoga, but with twice the sweating. You close your eyes, listen to the water drip from carved lion mouths into basins, and try not to think about how many bodies have soaked here before you. Hundreds, thousands, some healthy, some not so much. But here's the strange part: it does feel good. Your shoulders loosen, your breath slows. You feel lighter. Maybe it's the minerals, maybe it's the heat, maybe it's the placebo effect working its ancient magic. Whatever the reason, you are now part of a centuries-old tradition of letting water do the work. Out in the main hall, more bathers arrive, some fresh from battle, others straight from the forum. They talk politics. They argue about chariot races. They discuss philosophy in between scrubs and splashes. The bathhouse isn't just a wellness center, it's a stage. And you, dear listener, have front row seats to one of the most deeply human performances in all of Roman life, the pursuit of feeling better together. And maybe, just maybe you already do. The steam still clings to your skin as you wander further into the bathhouse complex. You're starting to understand that this place is less of a building and more of a temple disguised as a public amenity, each room a quiet altar to the Roman obsession with balance ritual and mineral water. And now you find yourself standing before the heart of it all, the sacred spring of Aquae Sulis. If the Romans had Yelp, this place would have a 1,000-year wait list. Nestled in what is now modern-day Bath, England, Aquae Sulis wasn't just another provincial bathhouse. No, this one shimmered with divine approval. The water here surged up from deep underground, naturally heated by geothermal forces and rich with over 40 minerals. Calcium, iron, magnesium, basically a multivitamin in liquid form. The temperature hovered around 46 degrees Celsius, hot enough to feel miraculous and just dangerous enough to remind you that the gods giveth, and the gods occasionally scald. But the Romans didn't build over these springs blindly. Long before they arrived, the local Britons already believed in their healing power. To them, the springs were a gift from Sulis, a Celtic goddess of fertility and prophecy. And in classic Roman fashion, the conquerors didn't bulldoze the local beliefs, they rebranded them. Sulis became Sulis Minerva, a goddess hybrid that combined local flavor with Roman pedigree. It's like mixing ancient folklore with corporate branding. The result: a destination both spiritually potent and state-approved. A grand temple was erected beside the spring. Pilgrims flocked to it hoping to be cured of their ailments. Many left behind votive offerings, small lead or pewter models of their body parts. A bad knee leave a miniature knee. Sore eyes drop off a tiny pair of lead eyeballs. It was like an anatomical suggestion box for the divine. You could almost hear the goddess muttering, "All right, another shoulder. What's going on with you people?" But it wasn't all reverence and gratitude. Many visitors brought curses, two thin lead tablets inscribed in tight, angry Latin, and then rolled or folded and cast into the spring. These defixiones often read like passive-aggressive Yelp reviews. To the goddess Sulis Minerva, I curse the one who stole my tunic. May they lose their sight, their wits, and their favorite sandals. It seems the Roman gods not only healed, they also moonlighted as petty enforcers. One particularly memorable curse tablet pleads for Sulis to strike down the thief who stole my gloves, whether man or woman, slave or free, and not allow them sleep or health until they return them. Now that's customer service. Historians still argue whether the spring's mineral properties actually cured anything. But the rituals, the theater of it all, certainly soothe something deeper than the flesh. Maybe it was the sense of being noticed, of being seen by gods and fellow humans alike, that brought peace to a restless body. You lean over the original sacred spring. Its emerald water still bubbles faintly, a soft exhale from the earth itself. The surface is flecked with shimmering flecks of mineral sediment. Every so often a rising bubble catches the light just so, and it's easy to see why someone once thought this water spoke. As you watch a priestess from centuries past seems to walk beside you in your mind's eye, her robes trailing damp stone, her voice raised in invocation. She gestures to a visitor to step into the water. He's nervous, his joints ache. His vision is failing, his soul is a little bruised. He believes. And that belief, that quiet, aching trust is what gives this place its power. The Romans treated water as both engineering problem and spiritual solution. They built aqueducts that defied terrain and gravity, transporting millions of gallons from mountain springs to thirsty cities. But here in places like Aquisulis, they bowed to the mystery. No pumps, no lead pipes, just the earth bubbling and alive. The bath complex expanded over time with layers of stone and mosaic, marking each century's attempt to improve on perfection. You can still see fragments of the original Roman paving. Your sandals rest where soldiers once stood, their knees creaking, their swords briefly set aside. In another corner, a mosaic floor glitters under shallow water geometric patterns, laid by artists who understood symmetry not just as math, but as therapy. Some patterns still seem to hum when you look at them too long, like the design itself is trying to rewire your weary thoughts. One quirky fact: the Romans believed the steam could carry prayers upward. Warm vapor drifting toward the heavens was thought to be a kind of holy telegram. So you can imagine the atmosphere, every cloud in the room, thick with someone's whispered wish, rising toward Minerva like invisible incense. And if you were lucky enough or rich enough, you might get a private chamber adjacent to the sacred spring. These rooms were like ancient VIP lounges. They came with massage slaves, perfumed towels, and the occasional interpretive priest. It's what every weary noble needed: aromatherapy and moral reassurance in equal measure. You step back from the spring. The air here smells faintly metallic like old coins or forgotten jewelry. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it makes you feel oddly grounded. Like you've touched something older than history, something still pulsing beneath the world we think we know. There are still moments when archaeologists uncover new curse tablets in the mud around the spring. Hundreds have been found. Some are bitter, some are hilarious, a few are almost poetic. Each one is a little window into someone's very specific frustration, Someone who thought just maybe a goddess in a bath could help them set things right. And the strangest part, they weren't entirely wrong. You step away from the pool and wrap a linen cloth around your shoulders. The spring behind you murmurs like a memory. And as you leave the chamber, you're certain of one thing: this water remembers everything. You shuffle forward slowly, your steps echoing softly against the marble as warm mist curls around your ankles. You're still glistening from your visit to the sacred spring, and your skin hums with that slightly buzzy warmth you only get from geothermal waters or falling asleep in the sun too long. But now comes the question every Roman faced sooner or later: what exactly is this supposed to cure? Because frankly, the list is long. The Romans believed the baths could heal nearly anything: joint pain, inflammation, stomach issues, cloudy eyes, emotional unrest, a touch of demonic possession. The answer every time: have you tried soaking in hot water for a while? It's almost admirable, really. No matter the ailment, the first line of treatment was go take a bath, Titus. You settle into a curved bench beside a shallow immersion pool. The water here is pleasantly warm and fused with something herbal, rosemary maybe, or thyme. Something that smells slightly like dinner. Across from you, an older Roman man dips in, gingerly groaning as he lowers himself to the waist, then sighing with theatrical relief. You get the feeling he does this every day, possibly twice. Back then, illness was understood through the lens of the four humors: blood phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. When these were out of balance, the body fell ill. A cold, too much phlegm, a fever, excess bile, a melancholy mood. Clearly, your black bile is out of control. You're not the only one thinking that black bile sounds like a metal band. And how did one balance the humor's baths, of course? Heat opened the pores, cold closed them. Scraping the skin removed impurities. Steam helped regulate phlegm. Everything had a reason. Even if those reasons didn't make much biological sense, they were at least delivered with conviction. But there were more unusual ailments, too. The kind you wouldn't necessarily tell your physician about. Say a creeping sense of unease, a feeling that your house was cursed, an odd twitch, strange dreams, whispered rumors about invisible forces or jealous spirits. For that, you didn't just bathe, you bathed ritually. At sites like Aquae Sulis and others from Carthage to Ephesus, certain baths were believed to possess supernatural healing properties. Not just mineral content, but actual divine energy. Water that had touched the gods or had been touched by them was a sort of liquid prayer. And if that didn't work well, you could always try sacrificing a small animal or leaving a token votive offering. Scholars still argue whether that ever worked, but who's going to question a man who claimed he slept better after dunking a ceramic liver into a hot spring? There's a famous record of a woman in Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, who claimed she was cured of her barrenness after 21 consecutive bathhouse visits and a whispered vow to Minerva. Now, was it the baths, the placebo effect, or just time doing its usual mysterious work? We'll never know. But you can imagine her joy and the strange satisfaction of leaving a small statue of a baby at the temple afterward. Some ailments the Romans treated at the baths seem absurd now. Consider wind in the belly a polite euphemism for what modern people might call persistent flatulence. Or wandering womb and affliction thought to occur when a uterus roamed freely around the body, causing hysteria and all manner of odd behavior. The treatment: steam baths, of course, along with perfumed compresses, meant to lure the womb back to its rightful location like a lost cat. Quirky fact number 1. Some Romans believed that water, if not refreshed often enough, could grow tired and lose its healing power. A bathhouse in Ostia had a rotation system where attendants would drain and refill each pool every few hours, not for hygiene, mind you, but to make sure the water stayed awake. You can imagine the poor slaves grumbling as they lugged buckets back and forth to appease a sleepy spring. Quirky fact number two: at certain bathhouses, there were designated laughing rooms, literal spaces where people were encouraged to engage in what they called rhesus therapia, laughter therapy. Whether it was jokes, riddles, or just the absurdity of five grown men slipping on wet tiles, the theory was that laughter could unblock emotional tension and restore humoral balance. And if you didn't feel better, well, maybe you weren't laughing hard enough. Back in your own pool, a few others have joined. An elderly woman with a twisted ankle, a soldier with a long scar on his thigh, a merchant rubbing his temples, clearly recovering from too much wine. You all sit in silence, save for the occasional cough or sniffle. But there's a sense of solidarity here, the silent agreement that everyone has come to be repaired, body, mind, or maybe just spirit. The heat seeps into your muscles. You lean your head back, eyes closed. Then the merchant breaks the spell by complaining about his mother-in-law. Loudly, repeatedly. The woman beside him nods sympathetically, offering him a small clay amulet shaped like a tiny liver, claiming it helped her cousin with leg cramps and bad dreams. He accepts it as if it were the emperor's coin. Placebo or not, hope is a powerful thing when it's warm and shaped like an organ. And perhaps that's the most enduring legacy of Roman baths. They were places where hope could be suspended in water. A strange mixture of tradition, science, superstition, and warm steam. Where the line between medicine and myth blurred like the condensation on the wall. One final thought before you move on. Many modern spas and wellness retreats still use principles rooted in these Roman practices. Mineral soaks, aromatherapy, heat cycles. The experience has been rebranded, modernized, maybe overpriced, but the heart of it remains. People through the ages have always sought comfort in warm water. You lift yourself from the bath slowly like a biscuit soaked too long in tea. Limbs pliable, mind quieter. Whatever was hurting feels slightly less so. Maybe that's all you needed. You pat yourself dry with a coarse linen cloth, feeling slightly boneless now, like someone turned your skeleton into warm wax. The air in this part of the bathhouse is cooler but not unpleasant. You've crossed into a different zone entirely, one where the water isn't the star, it's the space. The very walls seem to hum with precision. Welcome to the genius of Roman engineering, where comfort was crafted with such obsessive accuracy it bordered on sacred geometry. Roman baths weren't just relaxing, they were masterclasses in design. Every tile, every arch, every aqueduct-fed fountain was a piece of infrastructure poetry. You step into a grand corridor lined with alternating niches and columns. Soft light filters in from above through cleverly positioned oculi, circular openings that keep the hallways both lit and ventilated. You're not just in a building, you're in a breathing organism of heat, water, and stone. Take a moment, look around. That vaulted ceiling above you. It's not just pretty, it's efficient. Designed to funnel warm air and keep condensation from dripping directly on your head mid-massage. The floors beneath your feet are hollow part of the hypocaust system, an underground furnace network that pushed hot air through a maze of raised tiles and walls. You're basically walking on a primitive but highly effective radiant heating system. And the water itself, that didn't just show up. Aqueducts, sometimes sourced from miles away, carried the water with a gentle gradient, engineered to less than 1 degree of fall per 100 meters. That's right, long before laser levels or CAD software, Roman engineers were eyeballing perfection with strings, rods, and ruthless trial and error. Historians still argue whether these engineers were following codified building manuals or simply passing down craft knowledge orally, but the results speak for themselves. Some of these structures have outlasted entire civilizations, including awkwardly the civilization that built them. Now, step into the Frigidarium, a stunning domed chamber flanked by columns and inlaid with gleaming blue tiles. This was the cold room where bathers would plunge into icy pools after sweating in the caldarium. The cold wasn't just for refreshment, it was considered a crucial element of the temperature shock that would cleanse the body, close the pores, and hopefully prevent you from collapsing in the streets later. But it's the layout of the whole complex that truly impresses. Roman baths followed a kind of spatial choreography. Begin in the apoditerium changing room, proceed to the tepidarium warm room, then caldarium, hot frigidarium cold, and finally the palestra, the outdoor exercise yard. Each room flowed into the next with natural, intuitive grace. And all of this had to be replicated again and again across the empire. From Pompeii to Trier, from Leptis Magna to Londinium, the structure remained the same, like a cultural operating system. Quirky fact number 1. Some bathhouses were built directly on top of volcanic activity to harness geothermal energy. The most famous example is Baiae, a Roman resort town where emperors went to sweat and scheme. The baths were so luxurious and architecturally complex. Later, writers claimed Nero had parts of the complex designed by madmen with divine inspiration, which might just be the most honest description of architecture ever recorded. Quirky fact number 2, the walls of certain rooms were constructed with small clay tubes inside called tubulae, which allowed hot air to circulate vertically, warming the space evenly. Essentially, Roman bathhouses had heated walls. That's right, you're leaning against central heating in the year 120. Even the decorations served function. Mosaics with undulating wave patterns guided the eye and sometimes the feet. Marble in contrasting tones indicated changing temperatures or slipping hazards. That fish mosaic by the hot pool. It's not just art, it's a quiet warning to watch your step. There's a calming beauty to how methodical it all is. A society that could be barbaric in so many ways also had the capacity to treat wellness as architecture. They didn't just want to feel better, they wanted it measured in degrees Celsius and degrees of elegance. And lest you think this was all for show, consider this: engineers would often visit bathhouses in disguise to observe whether patrons were slipping overheating or flooding the caldarium. If too many complaints were filed or too many old men fainted in the steam, they'd redesign the system. Comfort was serious business. You make your way through a long gallery now where slanted terracotta walls rise like wings to support clear-story windows above. Light slants in and dances across the water below. Even now, centuries later, it still works. The space feels timeless, not just preserved but alive. Modern spas borrow heavily from these innovations. Steam rooms, heated floors, tiled relaxation pools, lounge seating optimized for the angle of the human spine. All of it owes a quiet nod to Roman architects who understood that to heal a body you must also house it well. And then, as you pass a crumbling arch, you spot something small and strange embedded in the stone. It's a carving, a barely there image of a dolphin leaping from a wave. Not a symbol of medicine or power, but of joy. The engineers built wonder into the walls. You step into the palestra where the light floods in, fully washing the courtyard in gold. A few bathers stretch lazily, their movements slow, contemplative. You realize this entire place isn't just for the body, it's for the soul. A place where stone and water hold you gently like the walls themselves are whispering, "It's all right. You're safe here." You close your eyes and tilt your face toward the sky. For a moment, the air is still. The stones are warm beneath your feet. And time pauses. You blink as the morning light edges across the floor, tiles illuminating a path forward into the tepidurium. The name sounds modest, just the warm room, but stepping into it feels like sinking into a perfectly drawn bath without touching a drop of water. The heat here is subtle, soft as a whisper. This is where things start. Not too hot, not too cold, just enough to coax your body into loosening its grip on tension and time. This is where the day's rituals begin. The air carries a gentle herbal tang. Bay leaves pine resin may be the ghost of someone's over-enthusiastic cologne from the night before. You take a deep breath, already feeling the layers of travel labor and daily grind begin to slide from your shoulders. A young attendant greets you with a thin smile and a strigil in hand. You remember now this is the scraping room. No soap, no bubble baths. In the Roman world, you slather yourself in oil, usually olive, sometimes infused with lavender or myrrh, and then have it scraped off your skin along with sweat dust and regrets. You lie on a marble slab, the kind that's perfectly body temperature. Not cold, not warm, just there. You brace yourself. The attendant starts to work with practiced efficiency, dragging the curved metal tool across your arm's chest legs. It's not painful, but it's definitely not spa gentle either. Think of it as a slightly judgmental massage where the therapist is trying to peel your sins off with steel. And then it's over. The oil is gone. The residue is wiped away with a clean cloth. You sit up blinking, already feeling a little less like a tired senator, and a little more like someone who's slept this month. This is how Romans transitioned from sleep to society. The bath wasn't just a way to clean, it was a full reboot. And if you skipped this part of the routine, people noticed. If you strolled into the forum smelling like last night's wine and yesterday's tunic, you weren't just dirty, you were uncivilized. A citizen of Rome was expected to maintain decus dignity, and that meant bathing. Daily, or at least pretending to. There's a funny sort of vanity baked into the whole process. Even the poorest Romans aspired to be seen at the baths. Not only was it free thanks to imperial subsidies, but it was a place to observe and be observed. You never knew who you might run into, a neighbor, a senator, a rival, or that one man who never shuts up about his grain business. Quirky fact number 1. Some Romans, especially athletes, would actually bottle and sell the oil scraped off their bodies after bathing. That's right. There was a second-hand oil market, allegedly infused with manliness, vigor, and the faint scent of overcooked ambition. It was prized by fans' lovers and a few deeply confused apothecaries. Quirky fact number 2. Roman children were sometimes bathed in donkey milk for softness. It was a luxury treatment, and yes, even the emperors did it. Cleopatra may have made it famous, but little Lucius with a runny nose and a rich father got the same creamy soak. As you move from the tepidarium to the adjoining room, a gentle clatter of sandals and dripping towels fills the air. A few bathers stretch out on stone benches doing light calisthenics. This was common a Roman warm-up before entering the hotter rooms. Arm circles, light squats, maybe a few games of ball toss. Not exactly CrossFit, but certainly more social. You join them if only to avoid standing like a lost column. A man beside you grins and begins a simple clapping game that somehow ends with him trying to balance a small terracotta cup on his foot. You laugh. He shrugs. "Balance, friend," he says. "First in body, then in life. You wonder if he's a philosopher or just incredibly hydrated. Across the room, a group of elderly women exchange gossip while toweling their hair. They're discussing a baker who's apparently switched from honeyed bread to fig loaves. Scandalous. Someone adds that he's also taken up with a new widow. More scandalous. The tone is light, but you can feel the social glue of the place the way these routines stitch the city together. Historians still argue whether the bath rituals were more about cleanliness or conformity. Probably both. But what's clear is that participation was everything. To not go to the baths was like skipping dinner church and your daily scroll of gossip all at once. You didn't just fall behind socially, you became invisible. By now, your skin is warm, lightly fragrant, and slick with that post-oil glow. You feel like a polished statue. A very sleepy, pleasantly disoriented statue. It's hard to believe the day has only just begun. The heat creeps up gradually now. You can feel it in your calves and your spine and the subtle tightening of the air. You're being led gently toward the caldarium where sweat becomes religion. But you're not rushing. The tepidarium was always meant to be the transition, like the moment when dreams fade and morning stretches into your limbs. You pause at the edge of a stone archway looking back once at the room you've just left. People still stretch, still gossip. A slave rinses the stone floor. Someone hums a tune you recognize from the tavern down the street. And you think if all medicine felt like this, maybe no one would mind getting sick so much. You cross into the next chamber and feel the air shift. It's thicker now, warmer, wetter. The caldarium presses in on your skin like a wool blanket soaked in sunlight. This is where things get serious. You're no longer lounging in polite heat. You're simmering in a communal stew surrounded by half-naked strangers, and the unshakable sense that this is exactly how Roman diplomacy often began mostly undressed and mildly dehydrated. You find a bench near the wall and settle onto the smooth, damp stone. It's hot, almost too hot, but you don't flinch. That would mark you as a bathhouse amateur. Instead, you nod politely to the men beside you, one with a belly like a wine barrel, another who looks like he wrestles lions for breakfast. Neither makes eye contact, but both subtly shift to make room. This, believe it or not, is one of the busiest rooms in the entire Roman world. Not in terms of noise, though the occasional cough or splash echoes dramatically, but in terms of raw human energy. Here in the mist and heat, everything gets discussed. Friends reconnect. Enemies pretend to be civil. Business deals start. Affairs get floated, sometimes quite literally. You're in the human equivalent of a boiling pot, and no one's stirring too fast. A man across the room catches your eye and waves you over. He's draped in a towel the color of overcooked lentils and surrounded by two younger men, one of whom keeps checking the temperature of the water like it might tell the future. You take a seat beside him. What do you think he asks, grain prices going to stabilize or collapse like my third marriage? You blink, unsure if he's joking. Then he laughs and slaps your back with a wet hand. Relax, friend. The only thing you need to worry about in here is staying upright. This was the unspoken magic of the Caldarium social rules blurred in the haze. In here, a merchant might talk politics with a centurion. A senator might quietly ask a slave for his opinion on horse racing. Tensions melted faster than sweat. Status still mattered. Of course, it's Rome after all, but in the Caldarium, your worth was measured in stamina. Quirky fact number 1. It wasn't uncommon for someone to pass out from the heat. Not that anyone panicked. There were designated attendants, usually bored-looking teenagers with towels whose sole job was to drag unconscious bathers out of the hot room by their ankles. It was considered completely normal, even expected. If you didn't faint at least once a season, were you even bathing hard enough? Quirky fact number 2. Some of Rome's more ambitious bathhouses included sound-amplifying architecture in their calderia, so your voice would carry dramatically through the steam. This wasn't a mistake, it was a feature. Important men used it to deliver gossip or sarcastic remarks to the entire room without ever raising their voice. Imagine weaponizing acoustics for sass. Your towel companion continues talking. You know this is where I finalized my third will. Right here, steam dripping down my back. Nothing like the smell of eucalyptus and mortal dread to help you prioritize your heirs. A nearby group chuckles. You glance around and spot a different kind of gathering near the corner. A small knot of men whispering urgently, faces tight with frustration. One's gesturing at another who looks sheepish. Probably a minor scandal, a business dispute, or someone forgot to bring a birthday offering to the wrong senator. The baths were for cleansing, but they were also for scheming. Historians still argue whether the Romans actually preferred bathhouse diplomacy or simply defaulted to it because everyone was already there. But what's certain is this: if something important was happening in your life, it would eventually end up discussed half naked and glistening in a room like this. And not just discussed, decided. Some of Rome's most influential backroom deals happened over hot water and sweat. From land grants to marriage contracts, political alliances to quiet bribery, the Caldarium was the boardroom before boardrooms existed. You glance across the room and spot a slave carefully applying scented oil to his master's shoulders, slow, methodical strokes like painting a fresco on living canvas. The smell drifts toward you, frankincense maybe, or myrtle. It's oddly calming, which is impressive considering you're essentially sitting in a human slow cooker. Eventually, the heat becomes too much. Your head buzzes slightly, time slows. You feel your heartbeat in your fingertips. That's your cue. You rise unsteadily, nod to the towel man, and make your way toward the exit. Your legs feel like soup noodles. Your thoughts like damp parchment. And still as you pass the others, you hear fragments of conversation. Gossip about a new priest in town, rumors of a gladiator's affair, the disappointing quality of imported dates from Carthage. The bathhouse wasn't just for hygiene or even health. It was Rome's social media feed, updated in real time, one overheard whisper at a time. As you step into a cooler hallway and take your first deep breath in minutes, your body tingles with relief. Behind you, the caldarium continues to simmer. Business as usual. You pause near a basin and splash cold water on your face. The sensation is electric. Every nerve dances. And just as you think you've caught your breath, someone passes by and mutters with a wink, "Watch out, some deals made in there last longer than most marriages." You smile, because now you know. You ease through a narrow archway and immediately the atmosphere changes. The heat behind you fades to a warm memory, and what greets you now is something softer, gentler. The air here is mellow, still warm, but no longer oppressive. Light filters in through high-grilled windows, illuminating a room of quiet balance. Welcome to the tepidarium's quieter twin, its moodier sibling, the subtle mystery of the Roman bathhouse, the tepidarium redux, or as locals might call it, the soul-soothing room. It's neither a place to sweat nor chill, it's the in-between. And for many, this room was the favorite. Not too much, not too little, just enough. You find a bench along the wall, curved, slightly heated from within by the ever-present Hippocos system. It doesn't toast your spine, just warms it slowly like a cup of tea held against the back of your neck. Around you, bathers lounge in contemplative silence. A few murmur softly, heads tilted close. One man appears to be asleep, arms crossed over his chest like a sarcophagus with particularly good posture. Here, you're not expected to talk much. This is the room of transition. After the caldarium, it's a place to recover. Before the frigidarium, it's a place to brace. But for others, it's where stories get traded in whispers or where tensions dissolve so gently you almost forget they were there. You lean back and take it all in. This room often served a double purpose. It was both a chamber of comfort and a subtle theater of unspoken signals. You could tell a great deal by who lingered here and who didn't. The ambitious skipped it, charging ahead into cold baths or business discussions. The wise returned to it, savoring its pause. The walls are mosaic, warm yellows, and terracottas with small glinting tiles of mother of pearl and deep sea green. One panel depicts dolphins chasing a triton, another a woman reclining with a peacock fanned out behind her like a breathing crown. It's not just decoration, it's serenity rendered in stone. Quirky fact number 1. The tepidarium was often where barbers and hairdressers set up shop. Yes, that's right. Roman men and women might get their eyebrows plucked or hair curled while draped in towels, lounging next to a mural of Neptune riding a seahorse. It was a multitasking paradise. Quirky fact number 2. There are records of emperors who held informal interviews in this room. If summoned to a bathhouse for a quiet word with someone powerful, it often happened here. Nothing says career-defining decision quite like discussing tax reforms with your knees out and a towel slipping off your shoulder. You spot a small alcove tucked into one corner of the room, its threshold marked by 2 slender columns of red-veined marble. Inside, an older woman sits beside a brass incense burner, gently tossing in crushed herbs. The scent that wafts out is oddly familiar sage bay laurel, perhaps a trace of dried orange peel. Romans believed the tepidarium helped open the spirit as well as the pores, a place for reflection, for asking questions you didn't quite know how to phrase aloud. And historians still argue whether the subtle silence of this room meant it was sacred or simply an architectural accident that encouraged peace. Either way it worked. You close your eyes. The heat wraps around you like a sleepy thought. This is where aches fade into the background, where your brain, no longer boiled by the caldarium, returns to a state of soft readiness. You're not thinking in sharp angles anymore. You're thinking in gentle spirals, each breath a loop that leads nowhere and everywhere at once. A man walks by humming something old, an ancient tavern tune maybe, or a lullaby passed down through generations who also sat in this very room. You catch only a few notes, but they're enough to make your fingers relax and your eyelids heavy. A group of young boys laughs quietly in the far corner, trying to balance oil flasks on their heads. Their laughter bounces off the curved ceiling in soft echoes. It doesn't disturb the quiet, it adds to it. This is the moment in your bathhouse journey where you begin to feel unhurried. Everything before this room felt like a procession change, sweat scrape talk. But now you understand the secret. The most healing part of the Roman bath might not be the water. It might be the waiting. The permission to do nothing but breathe in the warmth and let the marble hold you like time itself has grown gentle. You run a hand over the bench beside you, feeling the grooves worn into it by centuries of visitors. This very spot might have cradled the elbows of a poet or the tired back of a soldier just returned from the Rhine. Or maybe just someone like you who came not to be healed but simply to feel less tired for a little while. You remain there for some time, long enough to forget that time is even passing, long enough that you start to wonder if maybe this room exists outside of it. Eventually, an attendant passes by and gently taps your shoulder with the curve of a strigil. Not a command, a suggestion. It's time. Time for the cold. You rise slowly like mist pulled from stone. Muscles quiet, heart calm, mind drifting. You glance back once more before stepping through the arched doorway, and the tepidarium patient, as always, exhales behind you. The moment you step into the next chamber, you know you've entered a stranger part of the Roman bath experience. The architecture is familiar arched ceilings, soft echoing acoustics, marble ledges worn smooth by generations of elbows. But here something else lingers in the air. Not just steam or perfume, but the sharp tang of clay, the faint reek of sulfur, and the unmistakable whiff of, well, is that crushed mice? It is. Welcome to the strange and wonderful world of Roman balneotherapy, where healing went far beyond hot water and veered straight into the theater of the bizarre. You're guided toward a low table already occupied by rows of tiny jars and earthenware pots, their contents ranging from deep green sludge to shimmering yellow paste. An attendant wearing the world's most unimpressed expression holds out a small brush and gestures toward your face. For the skin, he says, very rejuvenating. You don't ask what's in it. You probably don't want to know. It turns out the Romans, like many ancient civilizations, were willing to rub just about anything on themselves in the name of health. Medicinal muds made from volcanic ash and river clay, sure. Mineral-rich slurries laced with copper flakes, absolutely. Fermented fish paste. Well, maybe that one was a mistake, but it happened. The trend was especially popular among the elite. Senators would compete over whose complexion gleamed the most during debates. High-ranking matrons sent servants to distant provinces for rare ingredients like Nile silt or Iberian bee venom. And emperors, they had entire rooms devoted to ointments, poultices, and pastes. You recline while a warm mask is applied to your cheek, slowly drying into a cracked mosaic. It smells faintly of almonds and something tangy like vinegar left in the sun. Made with powdered snail shell, the attendant notes casually. Very good for the humors. You nod slowly, hoping your eyebrows don't crack off. Now about that mouse powder. Quirky fact number 1. Roman physicians believed that certain animal ingredients had specific healing properties. Crushed mouse bones, when ground into a powder and mixed with honey, were applied to the feet to ease pain from gout. Pliny the Elder wrote about it with alarming confidence. You'll walk again, he promised, with no more than the stink of rodent to accompany you. Quirky fact number 2. If you had bad breath or were unlucky enough to share a bench with someone who did, you might be offered a mouthwash of vinegar and goat's milk stirred with a twig of mint. The effects were temporary, but the social pressure was eternal. Balneotherapy wasn't just external. Some bathhouses offered mineral-infused teas often brewed in copper kettles right there in the apoditerium or changing rooms. Infusions of rosemary marjoram or licorice root were popular. Others claimed miraculous results from sipping warm water straight from the spring, filtered through fine linen to remove sediment, fish scales, and possibly the occasional amphibian. Historians still argue whether these remedies were effective or simply ancient wellness branding. Certainly, some of the ingredients had legitimate properties like sulfur, which has mild antibacterial effects. But many were, shall we say, ambitious, like applying donkey dung poultices for headaches, or wrapping oneself in steamed cabbage leaves to draw out melancholy. You're now being wrapped not in cabbage, but in soft cloth soaked in mineral oil. The attendant hums as he works, occasionally adjusting the folds like he's wrapping a particularly high-maintenance gift. The cloth smells nice lavender and warm earth. You relax. Elsewhere in the room, a group of women reclines on heated benches with slices of cucumber balanced on their foreheads. One argues that bathing in rose water is more effective when you chant. Another insists that crushed pearls mixed with egg whites works better than vinegar. A third swears that bathing beneath the full moon increases circulation. None of them agree, but all are glowing. This is what Roman baths offered, a blending of medicine myth and sheer indulgent experimentation. People didn't just come for one cure, They came for every possible one at once layered, rubbed, soaked, and whispered into their bodies. You open your eyes and catch sight of a wall inscription, a faded dedication from a merchant to the goddess Solace, thanking her for healing his lower back pain after 3 applications of sacred mud, 2 nights of barley compress, and 4 tepid prayers. It's oddly specific and very Roman. A small shrine stands in the corner, dedicated not to a god but to Hygeia, the personification of health. A carved figure with a serpent in one hand and a basin in the other, she watches quietly over the proceedings. You get the feeling she's seen a lot, and yet behind all the rituals and ingredients, there's something very human at play. The hope that the body can be fixed, that a little heat, a little pressure, a strange smelling mask, any of it might pull something back into balance. Even if it doesn't work, the process soothes the mind, makes healing feel like a choice, not just luck. Eventually, your wrap is removed and the mask is gently wiped away. Your skin feels tight, fresh, strangely light. You sit up blinking at the shimmering haze in the air, and you realize something. Even if you don't believe in powdered mice or fermented barley mist, the bathhouse has worked its spell. You feel restored. Not just cleaner, calmer, maybe even slightly enchanted. The attendant hands you a final gift, a small clay jar filled with rose-infused oil. To take with you, he says, for days when you need to feel like marble. You nod grateful and step through the arch into the next room, leaving behind the scent of herbs, honey, and improbable healing. You step through the stone arch oil jar still warm in your hand and nearly stumble over something small and metallic underfoot. At first glance it looks like a coin, but it isn't. You crouch down. It's a thin lead tablet curled like a forgotten leaf, etched with barely legible Latin script. The hair on your arms lifts not from a draft, but from that subtle hush. You recognize now this isn't just a bathhouse. It's a temple of superstition, too. Welcome to the slippery spiritual underbelly of the Roman baths, where health wasn't only physical and healing didn't always come from water or warmth. Sometimes it came from revenge. You pick up the little tablet and read it aloud under your breath. The handwriting is jagged, furious, probably scratched by someone in the grip of frustration. It reads, "To Sulis Minerva May, whoever took my silver hairpin, suffer itching fingers until it is returned. May they lose their breath in steam and stub every toe henceforth." You blink. Well, someone was very attached to that hairpin. These were Defixione's curse tablets offered not just to the gods, but to the spirits believed to inhabit certain places, especially the dark, humid, echoing corners of Roman baths. People whispered their grievances into the air, etched them into metal, then folded or pierced them and threw them into water drains or beneath paving stones. And the bathhouse, despite its civility, was a hotspot for offenses, both real and imagined theft, betrayal, flirtations gone wrong. You'd be amazed how many ancient curses include phrases like, "Let them be unable to sit comfortably," or "May they grow warts in unfriendly places." Quirky fact number 1. At Aqui Sulis alone, over 130 curse tablets have been recovered. Most concern theft, stolen sandals, robes, jewelry, and in one dramatic case, a favorite cup. The emotional damage over a missing goblet was apparently enough to warrant divine punishment. Quirky fact number 2. Some bathhouses even had professional scribe priests nearby who specialized in writing these curses on your behalf. Think of them as ancient notaries for vengeance. You describe your grievance, and they'd craft an appropriately poetic and mildly terrifying petition to the gods. All for a modest fee, of course. You wander through a corridor lined with old drains, narrow channels carved into the floor, their sides worn slick with centuries of runoff. It's not hard to imagine the whispered complaints, the secret inscriptions, the many small injustices tossed into the dark below. Bathhouses weren't just places of healing, they were vessels of emotional release. You pause beside one drain in particular, barely wide enough for a wrist. Someone has wedged a folded piece of lead between the stones. You're not the first to find it. Archaeologists have recovered tablets here that include diagrams of enemy stick figures with their names etched beside them and instructions to spirits on where exactly to strike. His tongue, his liver, his loins. Subtlety was clearly optional, but not all bathhouse superstition was malicious. Some people left tokens for good fortune, small amulets, hairpins, carved animal bones. These weren't curses, but offerings, and ask for protection for love for safe passage across the sea or a speedy recovery from illness. The bathhouse, with its mingling of water and stone, was believed to be especially liminal, a place where the physical and spiritual realms thinned where gods might actually be listening. Historians still argue whether this blending of superstition and wellness was officially endorsed by Roman authorities, or whether it existed on the margins. But from the number of surviving curse tablets and votive objects, it's clear the practice was widespread. Perhaps not everyone believed, but enough people did that the gods must have been very busy sorting through spiritual spam. As you continue down the corridor, you pass a faded mural depicting a goddess, probably Sulis Minerva, holding a spear in one hand and a coiled snake in the other. Her expression is stern, but her eyes are kind. The duality of healing and wrath made her especially popular here. You didn't just ask her to fix your back. You asked her to teach your neighbor a lesson while she was at it. Nearby, a young woman kneels before a shallow pool. Her eyes are closed. She whispers something into cupped hands, then releases it like a breath into the water. She isn't praying loudly, but the intention is palpable, something between hope and warning. A small boy watches her, then tosses in a coin. Not a real one, a carved replica made of baked clay. A wish of his own. There's something hauntingly human in these rituals. They feel familiar. Even now we toss coins into fountains, make a wish as we blow out candles. Right thoughts will never send. The Romans just did it in steamier rooms and with significantly more creative threats. You finally reach the end of the corridor and emerge into a wide vestibule. The floor here is a mosaic of dark stone geometric patterns laced with tiny motifs. Snakes, laurel branches, watchful eyes. Symbols of protection. Warnings and blessings in equal measure. You glance behind you down the corridor of whispers and half-forgotten vengeance. For all the sweat and laughter and olive oil massages, the Roman bathhouse had another current running beneath it. Not just water, but intention. Not just ritual, but reckoning. You grip the small curse tablet you found earlier and place it gently on a stone ledge. Best not to carry someone else's grudge. Besides, your fingers have started to itch. Probably nothing. Probably. You emerge from the corridor of curses into a much larger space, open, airy, humming with energy and alive with voices. The air here is different. Yes, there's still a hint of moisture in it. Still the lingering smell of oil and tile polish, but there's also something sharper. Perfume, wine, roasted nuts. The unmistakable fragrance of ambition. This is where steam meets status. You're in the Basilica Thermarum, the central hall, the beating heart of the bathhouse. And while the other rooms have their purpose, this one has its performance. Because here, Romans come not to heal, but to be seen healing, to stretch, strut, and recline in such strategic ways that their wealth, wit, or recently waxed chest is on full display. You're instantly aware of the hierarchy. On one side, a cluster of older men lies on cushioned stone lounges, servants fanning them lazily while they sip spiced wine from delicate glass vessels. Their rings glint in the light. Their togas are draped just so. And their conversation, though quiet, carries weight, the sort of talk that makes magistrates nod thoughtfully and younger men pretend to understand. On the other, a group of younger bathers reclines more theatrically, laughing too loudly, lounging too dramatically, their towels more accessory than covering. You get the sense this is less about wellness and more about auditioning for something. Anything. You move quietly through the space, acutely aware of how slippery the floors are, both literally and socially. It's not about who has the best soak here. It's about who looks like they belong. And for the wealthy, the bathhouse was often where power was paraded with damp elegance. Quirky fact number one: Roman elites would sometimes send personal attendants ahead to the baths just to warm their preferred seats, scent the air with perfume and no joke, gently hum familiar tunes to create the right emotional atmosphere. Think of it as ancient bathhouse mood lighting delivered by a human Spotify. Quirky fact number two: high-ranking Romans often had their own custom towels embroidered with family symbols. If you saw a towel with a tiny golden eagle or laurel wreath stitched into the corner, you knew someone important had claimed that bench. Use it at your peril. You pause near a fountain, pretending to admire the way the water arcs gracefully into a shallow marble basin. In truth, you're listening. The conversation around you flows like bathwater, quiet, warm, and full of surprising currents. A man complains that his neighbor's olive trees have started casting shade onto his garden. It's a metaphor, he says solemnly. Another boasts that his daughter is being courted by a tribune with very refined calves. A third is loudly claiming that his last fever was exorcised by sleeping in a sulfur pit and drinking only warm goat's milk. No one asks follow-up questions. They all nod as if this is the sort of thing they do every Tuesday, and it wasn't just men playing these games. Wealthy Roman women had their own bathing schedules, separate hours, separate entrances, separate scandals. In some towns, the thermae mulierum, the women's baths, were considered even more refined with better decor and more exotic treatments. Peeling off a face mask made of saffron and gold dust while discussing your husband's latest debt scandal was practically a sport. Historians still debate whether the baths truly blurred class boundaries or merely allowed different ranks to coexist in close towel-covered proximity. There's evidence of shared spaces, plebeians soaking next to patricians' freedmen, quietly eavesdropping on policy debates, but also signs that segregation was enforced in subtler ways. The order of entrance, the proximity to key pools, the temperature of the water you were allowed to soak in. You walk past a small raised platform where a man is giving what can only be described as a damp lecture. His towel is tucked like a toga. His hands gesture wildly. His listeners, 5 men and 1 heavily oiled dog, nod along. He seems to be quoting Cicero while also arguing that peaches are superior to plums. You sidle up just as he declares, and therefore it is not the fruit but the intention of the fruit that defines virtue. The dog sneezes. No one disagrees. You take a seat nearby, letting the heat from the stone bench soak through you again. This part of the bath isn't physically restorative, it's socially illuminating. You're watching a play in real time, and everyone knows their part. A merchant strolls past trailed by 2 attendants carrying baskets of dried figs and roasted chickpeas. He offers you one with a wink. Good for circulation, he says. You nod solemnly and pretend to understand how legumes affect your veins. Across the hall, someone breaks into a quiet song, an old military marching tune slowed down to a lullaby. A few older men hum along, tapping fingers in time on their wine cups. It's oddly touching, like the bathhouse is remembering something on their behalf. And that's the paradox of this place. It's both stage and sanctuary. You perform, but you also relax. You plot, but you also heal. You fake it and you feel it, sometimes all at once. You rise at last, the jar of oil still tucked in your hand, and move toward the archway that leads to the next part of the complex. Behind you, laughter erupts again. Someone has slipped, probably theatrically, and is being helped up with excessive ceremony. You smile knowing they'll be retelling that fall all week. Did you hear Cassius went down like a toppled statue splash and everything? And everyone will laugh. Because here a little dignity lost in steam is all part of the performance. You're moving again, drawn down a quieter corridor now past the fading echoes of laughter and slippery status games. You feel looser, softer around the edges, like a painting that's just begun to blur. The fragrance of the main hall still clings to your skin, spiced wine, fig oil, damp marble, but there's something new teasing your nose now, roasted herbs, vinegar, honey smoke. It smells like lunch. Because yes, of course the bathhouse had a menu. You round a column and find yourself in a small shaded court where food vendors have set up their stalls, not makeshift ones either. These are semi-permanent kiosks, built right into the structure, complete with serving counters, clay ovens, and large amphorae filled with wine. You're in the bathhouse's unofficial cafeteria, a place where appetite and appetite meet. If you ever wondered what Romans ate between dips, here's your answer. The man behind the nearest counter waves you over with one hand, while continuing to ladle something thick and beige from a terracotta pot with the other. Barley stew, he announces. 2 kinds of lentils today, and pepper because I like you. You accept the bowl. It's warm, mildly salty with the consistency of enthusiastic porridge. You're not sure if it's breakfast or dinner, but it fills you in a way that hot water and gossip couldn't. Another vendor hands you a skewer of grilled fish, small, oily, still sizzling. It's wrapped in a fig leaf and lightly brushed with garum, the famously pungent, fermented fish sauce that Romans poured over everything. You take one bite and your mouth tries to both thank and challenge you at once. Quirky fact number 1. Garum was so popular that different cities had competing brands and jars of it bore labels, boasting where it was fermented, how many months it aged, and whose stomachs it had soothed. One recipe even included sea urchin brine and crushed figs. The Michelin stars of ancient Rome were judged by who could ferment a fish the longest without poisoning anyone. Quirky fact number 2. Some bathhouses served wine pops, frozen slushes of watered-down wine mixed with herbs, chilled in snow brought in from the mountains and stored in underground pits. A preposterous luxury in summer, a borderline sorcery in North Africa. You find a seat at a long stone bench where bathers are lounging with half-eaten olives in hand. A man with wet curls and a sunburned nose offers you a date stuffed with pine nuts. You accept. Careful, he says, chewing thoughtfully. The last one I had tried to crack a tooth. Or maybe my teeth are just tired of the empire. He grins. You smile. Food at the baths wasn't just sustenance, it was social lubricant. Deals were sweetened over honey cakes. Arguments softened by a shared bowl of marinated mushrooms. One young couple beside you is clearly on their 3rd helping of something wrapped in grape leaves. They're more interested in feeding each other than eating, and the woman has a streak of saffron sauce across her cheek that neither of them seems inclined to clean. Further down the bench, a group of men is arguing about cheese. Goat versus sheep, hard versus soft. One insists that a particular wheel of goat cheese from Sardinia cured his uncle's shingles. Another claims it caused his to worsen. No one can agree, but everyone keeps eating. You wipe your fingers on a napkin made of rough linen, no disposable paper here, thank you, and rinse your mouth with a sip of watered wine. The flavor is thin but aromatic, steeped with rosemary and a twist of something citrusy. You don't ask for details. In truth, no one came to the bathhouse expecting fine dining. The food was hearty, basic, meant to pair well with sweating and polite dehydration. But there was always variety. Roasted chickpeas, pickled onions, loaves of dense bread still warm from the ovens, and dessert. That might be honey-dipped dates, dried figs rolled in sesame, or a slice of goat cheese drizzled with thick, grainy honey. Historians still argue whether meals at the bath were considered casual or ceremonial. Some evidence suggests that birthdays, anniversaries, and even funerals were marked with small feasts right there in the bathhouse courtyard. Imagine commemorating your uncle's passing by, nibbling on anchovies while rubbing elbows with his bookkeeper. Very Roman. You lean back on your bench belly, content lips, sticky with grape must, and realize you've barely touched the oil jar you were given earlier. You unstopper it now, rubbing a little into your palms. It smells of lavender and something deeper, maybe bay leaf or aged olive wood. You rub it into your wrists like perfume. Not necessary, but very, very pleasant. The heat in your skin returns not from fire or steam, but from fullness. A calm, even warmth. As though your muscles are no longer asking for anything. Not salt, not rest, not revenge curses under a floor tile. You watch as a young boy chases a dog around the food stalls, both of them trailing pieces of flatbread like edible comets. The vendors shout in mock outrage, but no one's truly angry. This is part of the ritual, too. A man beside you burps loudly, apologizes softly, then takes another bite of something unidentifiable but apparently delicious. They never tell you this, he says, chewing thoughtfully. But sometimes the most healing thing in the world is just warm stew and no one asking you for anything. You nod, because honestly, he's right. You rise from the food court at a measured pace, not out of politeness, but because your legs now operate on a slower, soupier wavelength. Between the heat, the stew, and the soft smear of lavender oil still warming your wrists, you are starting to feel like a very content, but very lightly braised human dumpling. But as you drift through the corridor toward the next space, something curious draws your attention. The air is quieter again, not like the sacred stillness of the tepidarium, but the intellectual hush of people thinking deeply while their feet wrinkle in water. You're in the contemplation chamber, or as it's often remembered, the room of naked philosophers. Yes, the Romans, ever the multitaskers, were not content with merely soaking. Here, in this unassuming side wing of many bathhouses, bathers gathered to exchange not just gossip or soup recipes, but ideas. Big ones, grand ones. Ones that required gesturing dramatically with damp hands while quoting Cicero and occasionally slipping on the tile. The room itself is elegant but simple. A semicircular pool at its center surrounded by marble seating. The water here is cooler than the caldarium, warmer than the frigidarium, a Goldilocks bath just right for extended thought. The walls are lined with faded frescoes of muses, owls, and scrolls. You take a seat and observe. An older man is pontificating at length about stoicism. The soul must be untouched by fortune, he says, like a rock, unbothered by tide or towel. His audience includes 2 scribes, 1 woman with her eyes closed, and a dozing man with a fig in his hand. You're not sure if they're captivated or just too pruny to move. You scoot closer quietly, not because you intend to participate. No, you're far too relaxed for rhetoric, but because there's something oddly soothing about half-baked philosophy delivered by someone in a towel. Another group is debating whether the gods have preferences in hairstyle. One woman insists that Jupiter prefers braids. Her companion argues he's clearly a curls kind of deity. They go back and forth with the intensity of a courtroom drama, interrupted only by someone gently sliding into the water with the most delicate splash imaginable. Quirky fact number one. Many bathhouses had designated thinking rooms like this, not strictly for philosophers, but designed to encourage quiet conversation. The acoustics were engineered to dampen echoes, so no single voice dominated. In short, you could wax poetic about the meaning of life without yelling across someone else's armpits. Quirky fact number two. Some Roman writers, Pliny the Younger, Seneca, and even Martial, complained about loud bathhouse philosophers, especially the ones who used big words just to sound clever. One poet famously grumbled, "I came to sweat, not to hear Plato misquoted by a man in goat-fat hair cream." You close your eyes and lean back against the bench. The stone is warm but not aggressive. You let the voices blend. Someone quotes Virgil. Someone else argues that dreams are made in the liver, not the heart. A third insists that the best revenge is becoming rich and ignoring your enemies even in the frigidarium. One man begins composing a poem aloud, apparently inspired by the smell of beeswax candles and the curve of someone's elbow. You try not to laugh when he rhymes vapor with paper. Still, he seems pleased with himself. There's a low humming comfort in this room. Even if half the logic doesn't hold water and several of the bathers clearly shouldn't be handling metaphysics without adult supervision, it's peaceful. Unhurried, sincere. You spot a woman writing on a wax tablet nearby. She occasionally dips her stylus into a pouch of herbs as though scent sharpens the mind. A young man beside her stares at the ceiling and mutters, "What if the stars are gods watching their reflections in the baths below?" No one responds. It's unclear whether the silence is reverent or just tired. Historians still argue whether these philosophical bath sessions were earnest intellectual pursuits or just fashionable posing. But does it matter? Whether truth or performance, the effect was the same people left feeling like they'd done something meaningful? Even if it was just arguing about ethics while drying their knees. A servant walks quietly through the room offering small cups of cooled spring water laced with mint. You accept one gratefully. It tastes like calm. And perhaps this is the real function of the bathhouse philosopher, not to enlighten necessarily, but to distract from aches, to turn your thoughts outward instead of inward. The steam softens your limbs. The words soften your mind. A particularly long-winded man begins reciting from memory a speech about the virtues of silence. The irony is not lost on anyone. His friend gently splashes him in the face. He takes the hint. You rise, feeling the subtle tension that comes from too much thought in a room designed for soft bodies and round ideas. It's time to move again. You're drifting now, carried not by water but by rhythm, that gentle sequence. The baths encourage motion and stillness, immersion and observation. As you pass the fresco of a muse cradling a scroll, you notice someone has etched a crude, smiley face in the plaster beside her elbow. You smile back. Even here, surrounded by would-be sages and naked orators, someone remembered to joke. You leave the chamber with your mind slightly expanded, your heart slightly lightened, and your towel miraculously still properly wrapped. You're halfway down another corridor when you hear it. Not the soft murmur of philosophical debate, not the splash of water, not the hiss of steam. No, this is a dull thwack, followed by a muttered grunt, and the unmistakable shuffle of hurried footsteps on wet tile. And just like that, you're reminded for all the marble and mosaic someone still has to eat to keep this entire place running. You turn the corner and step into a service corridor slightly narrower, less polished and buzzing with quiet, choreographed chaos. This is the world behind the curtain. The side of the Roman bathhouse that most patrons never gave a second thought to. The realm of the slave and the servant. Here you finally see the machinery behind the illusion of luxury. A boy no older than 14 hurries past you carrying a stack of neatly folded linen towels that are far too large for his frame. Another holds a basin of hot coals with tongs weaving carefully between pools of condensation. Two young women are crushing herbs in a marble mortar, their hands stained green, their eyes red from what is definitely not just steam, and no one is dawdling. Everyone here moves with the urgency of people who know that if someone important doesn't like the temperature of their seat cushion, there could be real consequences. You step aside as a man pushes past you with a bucket of ash and a blank expression. He smells faintly of sweat and sulfur, part of the Hippocos team, no doubt. The furnace men. These were the laborers who fed the fires beneath the floors hour after hour, shoveling charcoal, adjusting vents, sweating more than anyone else in the entire building. Quirky fact number 1. Some bathhouses employed over 100 slaves just to keep daily operations going. That included fire maintenance, towel laundering, oil, preparation, massage, cleaning, serving food, watching guests' belongings, and yes, scraping sweat and grime off of privileged backs. Quirky fact number 2. There are surviving graffiti inscriptions from slaves working in bathhouses. One reads simply, "Still breathing." Another says he took 3 towels. I hope he slips. Gallows humor scribbled in charcoal or scratched into the plaster hidden beneath centuries of steam. Historians still argue whether bathhouse slavery was more refined than other forms of Roman servitude. Some claim it offered a path to manumission freedom through tips or patronage. Others argue it was the same brutal grind in nicer surroundings. The truth likely is that it depended entirely on the whims of the master you served. You pass a small back room and peek inside. A young man is meticulously applying oil to a marble bench, making it gleam. Next to him, a girl refills jars with perfumes lavender, rose, a spicy resin you can't name but recognize. The room smells like heaven and exhaustion, and still none of this is seen. Not by the men lounging in the caldarium. Not by the women arguing about goddess hairstyles. The bathhouse experience was designed to feel seamless, almost divine. But it ran on labor. Quiet, constant, invisible labor. You step into another narrow hallway and hear snoring. Peering into the shadows, you find a boy curled up on a folded towel near a water basin asleep. His arms are wrapped around a jug. He can't be more than 10. You stand still for a moment, letting the silence hold. A woman passes behind you, pauses, and gently tosses another towel over him. Then she keeps walking. This was the cost of comfort children working older slaves with sore backs, constant vigilance to maintain the illusion of ease. And while Roman society might have celebrated the genius of their architecture, the brilliance of their philosophers, and the elegance of their rituals, it rarely acknowledged the people who scrubbed the mosaics or lit the lamps. You walk through another chamber and overhear a whispered argument, one slave accusing another of stealing oil. They speak in hurried fragments, watching the hallway nervously. There's no yelling, just tension tightly leashed. Survival here depended on silence, obedience, and being always useful. Still, even in this world of labor, there are moments of light. A girl passes you balancing a tray of dried fruits and wine cups. She catches your eye and flashes a smile, not sarcastic, not bitter. Just real. It's a flicker of humanity in a space built to ignore it. Moments later, you find yourself in a tiny room, unmarked, quiet, filled with drying linens. A low brazier glows in the corner. It smells like olive oil and clean fabric. You sit down just for a moment, not sure if you're supposed to, but there's no one here to stop you. For the first time, you think about the slave who scrubbed the last bench you sat on, the hands that folded your towel, the fire that warmed your bath, Luxury, you realize, is never without a footprint. The Roman baths offered rest and restoration, but only for those who entered through the front door. You rise, adjusting your towel, and walk back into the main corridor. The opulence returns quickly. Mosaics perfume the soft sound of lyre music from somewhere down the hall. But now when you hear a distant thwack or see a servant pass you in silence, you know the machinery behind the magic. And you walk just a little slower, a little more aware. The bathhouse feels different now, not in its temperature or its scent. Those are still the same warm clouds of mineral steam, rosemary oil, and limestone polish, but in the undercurrent you carry with you the awareness that all of this, every glowing tile, every featherlight towel, every basin of water at the perfect temperature is quietly propped up by people who don't get to lounge. And yet, just as you begin to sink too deeply into that reflection, the air changes again, brighter, more open, the echo of sandals on polished stone growing louder. You've entered one of the larger central halls, its dome rising high above you, illuminated by slanted shafts of sunlight from open skylights. And there, standing beneath that celestial spotlight, is a man in a towel and sandals surrounded by an unusually attentive crowd. You recognize that look immediately. Celebrity, even in the ancient world, fame moved fast, especially through the steam. He's not a senator, his posture is too relaxed for that, or a philosopher, judging by the lack of gesticulating. But he has that certain glow, the effortless confidence of someone used to being recognized. Someone who's been soaked in both mineral water and public adoration. It could be a general, or maybe a gladiator turned poet. Or judging by the gold chain around his neck, a man who invented something very boring but very profitable, like a new kind of amphora lid that doesn't leak. In Rome, that was enough. The people around him nod eagerly, laugh politely. One woman offers him a fig. He declines but charmingly. A slave refills his wine cup from a chilled ceramic jug that was definitely buried in snow just hours ago. And just behind him, yes, that's it, tied loosely to a pillar standing calmly and far too large for the space around it, is a small elephant. A real live elephant. You stare. No one else seems to think this is particularly odd. Quirky fact number 1. Roman elites were known to bring exotic animals to the baths for display. Monkeys, parrots, panthers on leashes, and in one recorded case, yes, an elephant who allegedly enjoyed the tepidarium, but not the frigidarium. Because, of course, quirky fact number 2. Emperor Caracalla was so obsessed with outshining his rivals that he ordered sections of the baths of Caracalla to be upgraded with gold leaf mosaics. Imported Greek statues and heated lap pools specifically reserved for visiting dignitaries or his pet tiger. That's not a metaphor, he had a tiger. Historians still argue whether the celebrity presence in Roman baths was spontaneous or staged. Were they really just passing through, or was this a low-key publicity tour with towels? Either way, the effect was the same awe. You continue past the elephant who flicks one ear and blinks at you. It smells faintly of hay and frankincense. You give it a respectful nod. The elephant declines to comment. Elsewhere in the chamber, a group of musicians has set up near the edge of a shallow pool. A lyre, a reed flute, and what appears to be a man attempting rhythm with a pair of small clappers. The music is light charming, almost improvised, but you catch familiar motifs. Old love songs, military marches softened into lullabies. Melodies people hum without realizing. You find a seat beside an elderly woman watching the crowd with a half smile. That one, she says, gesturing to the celebrity, thinks he's Hadrian. But Hadrian never sang love poems while dripping wet in the caldarium. You chuckle. She continues. My second husband once slipped trying to impress a visiting consul. Broke his dignity in 3 places. You nod, you believe her. Because in places like this, the boundaries blur. The mighty sweat beside the modest. A baker's apprentice might sit closer to an emperor than his own cousin. The bath equalizes, if only for a moment. Status is still there, of course, stitched into towels and poured into goblets. But there's something beautifully ridiculous about everyone trying to look impressive while wrapped in a damp sheet. There's laughter nearby, someone reciting a risque poem while balancing a bowl of olives on their head. A round of applause follows. Not for the poem, for the balance. You stay a while longer, not because anything important is happening, but because it all feels gently absurd and very human. Eventually, the celebrity packs up robes. Redraped entourage, reassembled elephant led softly back through an overlarge doorway, and the room settles again. The music softens. The clappers give up. You stand, stretch, and walk slowly through the space. Along the far wall, a new mosaic is being installed. A craftsman crouches low, placing tiny glass tesserae into fresh mortar. The image isn't finished, but it looks like a dolphin carrying a lyre on its back. You tilt your head. He nods. For the music, he says, and for luck. The bathhouse, after all, was not just about water. It was where stories gathered, where fame mingled with salt, and where elephants just once in a while waded through history wearing perfume and perfect manners. You pass the fading notes of a flute, your skin still damp. Your feet light, your mind amused. And onward you go. You pass into a narrower hall, and instantly a cool gust greets you, like an open-handed slap from the gods. Gone is the dreamy warmth, the perfumed steam, the lazy stretch of muscles in perfect rooms. Instead, your skin puckers, your breath tightens, your brain issues an immediate protest. Nope, you've arrived at the frigidarium, the cold plunge. This was where Roman bathers faced the final trial, the icy punctuation at the end of a day spent in water and warmth. It wasn't just tradition, it was believed to seal the skin lock and the benefits of the bath and shock the humors into alignment. And let's be honest, it was also a test of dignity. Because when the water is that cold, keeping your towel on, and your composure is an act of sheer willpower, you stand on the edge of the natatio, the large, cold pool. It's deep lined with pale blue-green tiles that seem to glow faintly under the water. 2 steps descend into the shadowy surface. A few brave souls bob at the far end, their expressions locked somewhere between serenity and suffering. You hover, contemplate, and then, with as much nobility as one can muster in a damp towel, you descend. The first step numbs your foot. The second steals your breath. The third, you are submerged. It's worse than you imagined. The water hits you like a bucket of melted mountain snow. Everything clenches. Your heart does something dramatic. Your arms flail briefly in what you hope looks like a dignified shrug, and for a moment your soul exits your body to watch in mild judgment from the ceiling. But then, clarity? The cold wipes away the drowsiness of the caldarium. It snaps your mind awake. Every part of you feels new, scrubbed from the inside. You emerge gasping, blinking, borderline euphoric. You cling to the pool's edge beside a grizzled man with a beard that might have seen Augustus's reign. He doesn't look at you, just says, "First time." You nod. He smiles without teeth. You lived. That's more than I can say for my cousin. He sneezed once and never came back. Quirky fact number 1. Some Romans believed that the frigidarium's cold plunge could ward off aging. Not metaphorically, literally. Cold water slows decay, claimed one rather optimistic physician. The logic: if your meat doesn't rot in winter, neither should you. Quirky fact number 2. There was a brief fashion trend in the late Empire where bathers would throw in rose petals or citrus peels before plunging both for the scent and so they could say they were bathing in floral snow. Predictably, someone slipped. Predictably, someone sued. Romans were dramatic like that. You swim a few slow strokes. The water numbs your limbs but sharpens your mind. There's something intoxicating about the purity of it. After all the heat, the sweat, the oils and ointments, this is like being rebooted. Wiped clean body and thought. You hear a splash to your left as two boys leap in and immediately regret it. Their shrieks bounce off the walls. Their mother, still lounging on a nearby bench, doesn't even flinch. Clearly, this is her version of childcare. Elsewhere, a man calmly recites a legal treatise between shivers. He punctuates each sentence with a teeth-rattling pause as though the cold somehow makes his memory more precise. You exit the water slowly, every inch of skin tingling. An attendant offers you a dry cloth. You take it, wrap yourself, and sit on a nearby bench while your body negotiates with itself. There's a brief moment always the same when the cold stops being cold and becomes something else. Not comfort exactly, but awareness, like you've been pulled back into yourself. Historians still argue whether the plunge was meant to end the bath ritual or reset it. Some evidence suggests Romans would repeat the full cycle multiple times. Warm, hot, cold, warm again, like an ancient circuit of spa-based time travel. You lean back against the bench, eyes closed, letting the post-plunge high settle into your bones. Around you, the room hums gently. Footsteps, murmurs, an occasional splash. No one's in a rush here. The frigidarium is serious business. Even the architecture's stark. No gilded mosaics, no dolphin frescoes. Just smooth marble, crisp air, and water that feels like a personal challenge. The design speaks clearly. Welcome. Please enjoy your existential crisis. A pair of old friends walk by arguing amiably about whether Seneca's writings were better before or after exile. One gestures emphatically and almost drops his sandal into the pool. The other catches it mid-air without missing a beat. You suspect this is not their first debate. As your skin finally settles into a new temperature equilibrium, a delightful state between awake and tranquil, you rise. The cloth around you is dry now. Your breath no longer hitches with every inhale. You are in every sense of the word refreshed. You pass back through the archway, one last glance at the icy pool behind you. It ripples softly, light from the skylight, glinting across its surface like liquid glass. Whatever else the Romans got wrong, they understood this to feel truly alive. Sometimes you need to leap into something absurdly cold. You move through the corridor like a traveler returning from another world. And in a way you are. That cold plunge, so shocking, so vivid, has erased your sluggishness, replaced it with the crisp lucidity of someone who now understands why polar bears are so grumpy, yet oddly serene. Your path takes you down a gently sloping ramp. The air warming again, the steam slowly creeping back into your pores like an old friend who never stays mad. But this time, you're headed somewhere few ever think about below. Not beneath your dignity, no, that's what happens when you slip in the frigidarium, but beneath the floors. Beneath the baths themselves, into the engineering belly of the beast. Welcome to the Hipparcos system. The floor beneath Roman bathhouses wasn't solid. It was a hovering plane propped up on hundreds of small brick pillars, spaced evenly like a forest of red stumps. This was the invisible realm where hot air circulated, pumped in from furnaces at one end of the building, then channeled underfoot and up through terracotta flues inside the walls. You're standing in the space between. The air here smells like old ash clay dust and something tangy burnt olive wood, maybe. It's not as hot as you'd expect, The fires have long since died, the caretakers gone, but the structure remains remarkably intact. You crouch beside one of the brick piers, running your fingers along its ridged surface. It was shaped by hand, laid by someone who never got to soak in the waters above. The genius of the Hippocaust wasn't just in its warmth. It was in its consistency. Roman engineers designed these systems to heat multiple rooms at once at varying temperatures without scorching the marble or suffocating the guests. A properly maintained Hippocaust could run continuously for weeks. All it needed was a near constant supply of firewood ash removal and the unwavering labor of furnace slaves. Quirky fact number one. The furnaces were often so large and so fiercely hot that the workers tending them had to rotate shifts every hour. They wore leather aprons, soaked their feet before entering, and occasionally passed out from the sheer heat. They also developed an impressive ability to sleep anywhere, anytime, including while standing. Quirky fact number two. To test whether the Hypocaust system was working properly, engineers would lie flat on the floor of the bathhouse and listen. The sound of air moving soft, continuous like the sigh of a tired deity meant success. If it was silent, something was blocked. If it whistled, something was broken. If it roared, something was about to explode. Historians still argue whether these systems were standardized or improvised. Some inscriptions suggest detailed architectural plans. Others hint that master builders winged it with gut instinct and educated guesses. Either way, the result was spectacular, a building that breathed. You step through a low arch into a wider chamber, the Prefernium, the fire room. This was where it all began. The heat, the ritual, the luxury. You can still see the soot staining the stone, the marks where the bellows once stood, the grooves in the floor worn by the feet of men who walked back and forth with bundles of firewood for hours. You try to imagine the noise. Not the peaceful trickle of water from above, but the clang of metal, the rasp of shovels, the grunt of labor. This was the forge that powered a palace, and yet from the surface, none of it showed. That was part of the Roman miracle, its duality. Above elegance, calm dignity. Below heat, smoke, sweat. The bathhouse was a monument to controlled chaos. A dream floated atop fire. You climb a narrow staircase that brings you back up into a side corridor of the main bath. Your body still hums with the memory of the cold pool. Your feet tingle faintly from the warmth rising through the marble. Above your head in a shallow alcove is a mosaic of Vulcan, the god of fire, and the forge hunched over an anvil, eyes glowing, hammer mid-swing. He smiles slightly as though he knows the secret that beauty always comes at a cost. Nearby, a group of attendants is laying fresh charcoal for tomorrow's fire. One catches your glance, then continues without a word. They know you've seen it now, what lies beneath the comfort. You wander back into the heart of the bathhouse and realize you're seeing it differently. Every heated bench was warmed by flame. Every gentle breeze in the caldarium began in smoke. Every massage took place above an inferno. And yet none of that diminishes the beauty. If anything, it deepens it, because when you sit down on a warm stone ledge, shoulders, soft breath, even you now feel not just the heat but the effort. The design. The miracle of invisible warmth rising through cold ancient stone. You lean back, and for the first time you listen. Not for voices, not for poetry, not for philosophy, but for the quiet hum of engineered air whispering its way upward centuries after the last fire died. You emerge from the corridor's stone mouth and find yourself in a place rarely discussed in noble epigrams or court poetry, but undeniably central to the Roman bath experience, the latrines. Yes, the lavatory. It's not glamorous, it's not sacred, and yet somehow it manages to be ornate. The latrine hall is a wide chamber lined on both sides with smooth marble benches, each pierced at regular intervals with round, seat-sized holes. Beneath them flows a gentle, constant stream of water like a narrow brook that knows far too many secrets. Another gutter runs along the front of the bench for washing. The air here is perfumed with rosemary myrtle and something faintly chalky an earnest attempt to wrestle function into dignity. You take a seat not necessarily because you need to, but because this is part of the ritual too. You're not alone. Several bathers lounge here as casually as they would in the caldarium, chatting, stretching, and yes, relieving themselves with a kind of breezy nonchalance that only long exposure to communal life can produce. One man is mid-story, dramatically reenacting a moment from the chariot races. His audience responds with laughter, which echoes in a way that feels both highly inappropriate and exactly right. A woman beside him corrects his punchline. It wasn't his cousin who slipped, she says, dabbing her neck with a linen cloth. It was his goat. Slipped, squealed, ruined the wine. Everyone nods in solemn agreement. Welcome to one of the least private and oddly social experiences of the Roman day. Quirky fact number 1. Roman latrines were often built with no partitions. Communal bathroom use was completely normal, even expected. In fact, scholars now believe that much of daily gossip, political scheming, and matchmaking happened right here seated above a trickling drain. Quirky fact number 2. Instead of toilet paper, Romans used a tersorium, a sponge on a stick shared among users and soaked in vinegar or salt water between uses. These were kept in communal pots beside the washing trough. If that turns your stomach a little, you're not alone. Even ancient satirists wrote jokes about them. Some things never change. Historians still argue whether Roman latrines were used by all citizens equally, or if there were class-segregated facilities. What's clear is that within the grand bathhouses, the lavatory was integrated seamlessly into the architecture, another chamber in the ritual of renewal. No shame, no curtain, just flow. No, you glance up at the fresco overhead. It's not what you expect. Not grim, not clinical. It's cheerful. A painted border of flowers swaying vines and birds mid-flight. Above the bench on the far wall, a smiling satyr holds a fig leaf and a drinking cup as if to say, "You've made it this far. Why not enjoy the view?" There's even graffiti scratched into the marble near your seat. Some of it crude, some surprisingly poetic. I dream of her even here. Caius owes me 2 figs. Beware of hot seats. Someone has etched a cartoon of a lion seated on the bench looking thoroughly unimpressed. You chuckle. It's strange how something so well biological feels so humanizing. You've seen emperors in mosaic, philosophers in steam, and now ordinary people doing the least glamorous thing imaginable side by side with more dignity than many modern meetings. You step away from the bench and head toward the washing basin. A slave pours tepid water from a ceramic jug over your hands. You dry them on a cloth that smells faintly of rosemary and ash. Then you notice a small stone shelf carved into the wall, its surface worn smooth by time. On it sits a collection of tiny terracotta tokens, coins, carved animals, fragments of bone. Not money, not offerings, just things people left behind. Whether by accident or intention, no one knows. A sign of gratitude, perhaps, or superstition, or a subtle prayer to Fortuna that things might continue moving along literally and metaphorically. You exit the latrine with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has just survived a deeply vulnerable group activity with your self-respect intact. Back in the main hall, the smells return: lavender, citrus, sandalwood. They don't cover the scent of the latrines, they simply absorb it into the experience. The Romans didn't separate the sacred from the practical. They knew that to feel whole, you had to honor both. You look around and realize every part of this place has a rhythm, a pulse. Even the less elegant chambers beat in time with the rest of the ritual. Cleanse, scrape, soak, eat, talk, rest, repeat. And yes, relieve. A man passes by humming, drying his hands with a flourish. He meets your eye. They say Jupiter himself wouldn't miss a good visit to the latrine, he winks. You nod back. After what you've just seen, you believe it. As you walk slowly through another broad, curving passageway, something changes. The light shifts. The scent shifts. Even the rhythm of the bathhouse, once lively bright, punctuated by laughter, and the occasional shriek from a too ambitious plunge softens. The day is nearing its end. You find yourself in the Vesperarium, the baths after dark, a place where the mood drapes itself in twilight, where lanterns flicker against damp walls and conversations drop into whispers, whether out of reverence or a kind of intimate fatigue. It's quieter now, not empty, just slower. Around you, the great halls have dimmed. Oil lamps cast trembling gold pools of light across the stone. Long shadows stretch behind columns, turning familiar features into silhouettes. The pools still ripple, the benches still hold bathers, but everything feels more wrapped in silk. Less theater, more dream. You pass a woman lounging beside the tepidarium fountain. Her hair is pinned in coils, her fingers trailing in the water. Beside her, a man reads aloud from a wax tablet, his voice low, his words unhurried. You don't understand every phrase, but the rhythm of it carries something older than language. Something lullaby-shaped. In a nearby corner, two old friends are playing a soft game of knucklebones on a towel. They take long pauses between throws. Not because they've forgotten the rules, but because they've begun to forget the need to win. Quirky fact number 1. Roman bathhouses often stayed open after sunset, particularly in warmer months. After dark visits became so popular that dedicated evening attendants were employed servants whose only job was to refresh lanterns, replenish perfumed oils, and tactfully remove anyone who snored too loudly on the benches. Quirky fact number 2. In certain cities, the nighttime bath circuit was known to double as a courtship ritual. People came not just to cleanse, but to glow, lit by flickering lamplight, glistening with scented oils, and mysteriously backlit like heroes in a myth. And yes, poets swooned. Publicly. You step into the caldarium again now, much quieter, the steam swirling slowly like drifting thought. No one's arguing about taxes anymore. No one's quoting Seneca. The water laps gently against the edge, and a few bathers float motionlessly, eyes closed, looking like statues, given permission to dream. One man hums a tune you recognize. It's one you heard earlier, but now it's softer stretched, like someone playing it through fog. You sink onto a warm bench and watch the flickering of the lantern above you. Each time the flame sputters, the shadows dance across the ceiling like gods telling bedtime stories. And it hits you this too was part of the Roman bath's genius, not just a ritual of action but of rest. A place that matched your pace, that offered silence after conversation, stillness after movement, cool after heat. The Vesperarium wasn't just quieter, it was gentler. Some guests begin to leave now. You hear the shuffle of sandals, the rustle of robes, the quiet murmur of goodbyes. But not everyone departs. Many linger. Some stretch out on the warmed benches and nap. Others sip small cups of wine and share secrets that only rise to the surface after sunset. You walk past the central courtyard. A breeze has picked up and you catch the distant scent of myrrh rose and warm linen. Overhead stars begin to peek through the open roof. A single vine curls up one column like a sleepy child, wrapping around a parent's leg. In one alcove, a man sits with a harp. Yes, a harp plucking absent-minded chords as he watches the water. He's not performing, just playing, just being. Historians still argue whether the nighttime baths were seen as restorative or indulgent. But when you sit here skin warm, breath slow, surrounded by the hush of shared quiet, you don't need a debate. You already know the answer, and as the night deepens, a subtle transition occurs. The conversations fade altogether. The sounds reduce to just three: the slow trickle of a fountain, the occasional creak of stone under shifting weight, and the steady exhale of people letting go, of tension, of time, of everything. But now, you sit in that stillness until your thoughts lose their edges, until your limbs feel like velvet, until your name, your worries, your errands for tomorrow all feel like they belong somewhere else entirely. And in that moment, beneath the lanterns, wrapped in heat and hush, you are entirely present, entirely bathed. You don't remember standing up. One moment you're in the vesperium, half asleep beneath the lantern's glow, and the next you're walking slowly, barefoot, towel draped, loose over your shoulder through a side colonnade that's quieter than quiet. The stone beneath your feet is cooler now, not unpleasantly so, but different. Something has shifted. It's not just night anymore, it's after. This isn't the bathhouse at its peak or even its romantic twilight. This is the bathhouse in decline. Not just for the evening, but in the grander, sadder, longer view of history. You step into a section of the complex that is rarely visited. Not by bathers, not by staff, not by anyone except perhaps a bored guard or a curious child with a lamp and too much imagination. The walls here are crumbling slightly, the mosaics are faded, the water basins are dry. The silence isn't tranquil now, it's hollow. You're walking through a ghost. What was once glorious is now in retreat. You can almost hear echoes of footsteps, sandals, scuffing, marble laughter bouncing off dome ceilings, the hiss of steam, the splash of fountains. But it's all memory. Faint. Watermarked. You run your hand along a wall and flakes of plaster dust your fingertips. The pattern beneath it, once vibrant, now shows just the faintest suggestion of dolphins and sea gods. Their outlines blurred, their smiles faded into the stone. You pass what remains of a hippocaust room. The floor tiles have collapsed, exposing the little brick piers underneath like broken teeth. A few still stand. Most do not. The air smells different here, dust-dry limestone, the breath of long-extinguished fires. Quirky fact number 1. Many Roman bathhouses didn't fall all at once. They declined, gradually neglected after invasions, fires, or loss of municipal funding. As aqueducts cracked and maintenance faltered, pools dried up. First the frigidarium stopped working, then the caldarium grew tepid, and finally the rooms filled with silence and weeds. Quirky fact number 2. In the centuries that followed the collapse of the Roman Empire, many bathhouses were repurposed, turned into stables, churches, marketplaces, even homes. In one famous case, a bath's empty reservoir became a fish pond. In another, it served as a burial site. The bones rested in a place once devoted to comfort. Historians still argue whether the loss of the bathhouse signaled the loss of public health or of something more emotional, communal space dignity ritual. A place where bodies were equal in steam and silence. A place that reminded people they were human and deserved rest. You stop before a broken archway. Its keystone lies on the ground, cracked, moss-covered. Through the gap you can see a patch of sky still dark, still infinite. And beyond that, the faint shimmer of stars reflected in a half-collapsed plunge pool, now filled only with rainwater and time. You step closer. You crouch by the edge. And for just a second you glimpse your own reflection. Not as you are not exactly, but as someone who belongs here. Not a tourist, not a historian, just a person. Tired. Curious. Alive. There's a whisper in the water. Not words. just a sense of what came before. The life that pulsed through these walls, the steam, the sweat, the scraping of strigils, the smell of thyme and crushed roses still lingers here. Like perfume on the pillow of an empty bed, you sit for a moment on a crumbling bench. No cushion, no linen, just rough stone and memory. And still somehow it comforts. Even in ruins the baths retain their gentleness. Even in silence they remember how to soothe. Eventually you rise and turn back toward the living part of the complex. You pass the same halls now dimmer, the same pools now quiet, the same murals, their gods still gazing skyward as if unsure what happened to the people who once whispered prayers into steam. The bathhouse lives on, in memory, in echo, in muscle, and in you. You return slowly to the modern heart of the bathhouse, the part still alive, still warm, still holding the gentle rhythm of water, conversation, breath. But something has shifted. After walking through the forgotten wings and dust-laced ruins, your senses are sharper. You're no longer here just to soak or observe. You're here to witness. And as you cross into the familiar inner chamber, the restoration wing, you see something that stops you. A group of workers, no longer slaves, no longer servants, kneeling carefully around an ancient mosaic floor. Brushes in hand, cotton cloths, gentle tools. They're not bathing, they're preserving. The Roman baths are returning, not as they were, but as something new. Translated, interpreted, kept. You've entered the modern layer of the story. Here in places like Bath in England, Baden in Germany, Rome, Pompeii, Istanbul, people come not to soak away their aches in sulfur and superstition. Though, let's be honest, some still do, but to touch a piece of a past that still knows how to hum. You watch a guide lead a group of tourists through the halls. They whisper not out of reverence, but perhaps because the very walls ask them to. She points to an old lead pipe exposed in the wall. This, she says, carried water heated by fire from underground. Every day, for hundreds of years, the visitors nod. One boy looks bored, another fiddles with a phone. But you smile. Because you know what they don't, what that water once sounded like, echoing through marble. What the tepidarium smells like after sunset. What it feels like to be scraped clean and oiled while someone recites love poetry with poor meter. Quirky fact number 1. At the modern bath spa in England, originally aquae sulis, you can still dip your fingers into water that's flowed continuously since Roman times. It's filtered now, sanitized, tested. But the mineral content, still essentially the same. And yes, it still smells faintly like warm coins. Quirky fact number 2. In some restored sites, archaeologists discovered that centuries of visitors had left behind tiny personal items. Hairpins, glass beads, carved bone dice that modern conservators collect and catalog. Some now sit in quiet museum cases under the label unclaimed offerings. Even the smallest loss, it seems, was sacred here. Historians still argue whether today's spas deserve to call themselves Roman. Can a building made of steel and filtered light really echo the ritual of oil clay and curse tablets? But maybe that's the wrong question. Because standing here, watching a conservator clean mosaic grout with a toothbrush, and a kind of reverence usually reserved for altars, you realize it isn't about recreation. It's about remembrance. You step into one of the newer pools, a carefully recreated caldarium, fed by the original spring. The air is warm, not hot. The tiles are new but made to match. There's no hypocaust under your feet, but there is an undercurrent of something familiar comfort. You sit, let the water cradle you. And while the lighting is electric and the air is filtered, and no one is scraping your back with the strigil anymore, probably for the best, you find yourself feeling the same thing Romans must have felt: peace. You overhear a nearby guest ask, "Do you think they really believed it healed them?" Her friend shrugs. Does it matter? You close your eyes and float arms spread, body soft. No politics, no timelines, no toga envy. Just warmth and the faint sense that you're being held by something older than architecture. You think of Sulis Minerva, of curse tablets, of philosophical towel debates, of exhausted furnace boys and elephants with very gentle manners. And somewhere between then and now, between myth and mineral, you realize you're still part of it. The water now is very still. Your body hovers between weightless and weighted like you're suspended in something thicker than mineral water, something older, softer, slower. You don't need to move. You don't even need to think. The bathhouse, this ancient machine of healing and theater, has done its work. But before the story ends, there's one last question. Echoing faintly in the rafters above the domes and in the ripple beneath your shoulder blades, did any of it actually heal? It's a fair question, a modern one. A question of outcomes and studies of clinical trials and skeptical eyebrows. You smile, because the answer isn't as simple or as relevant as it might seem. You see, for the Romans, healing wasn't just about curing, it was about restoring. Not just bones and blood, but mood, hope, equilibrium. And if warm water scraped skin, shared food, laughter, and whispered wishes made someone stand straighter, walk lighter, breathe easier, wasn't that a kind of healing? Take the soldier with the bandaged foot and the tired eyes. Or the widow who smiled again after a herbal wrap and a very questionable massage. Or the boy who whispered a curse into the drain and felt finally a little less small. Historians still argue whether Roman baths had any measurable impact on health. But the evidence is there in the infrastructure they built, the money they poured, and the stories they left behind. These places mattered. They were necessary. Whether or not they worked by our standards, they worked. Quirky fact number 1. Modern doctors have studied the effects of thermal baths on arthritis, circulation, even mood, and yes, there's some evidence to support the claims. The minerals do something, the heat does something, the pause in life does the rest. Quirky fact number 2. Placebo or not many bathhouse goers returned multiple times a week. Some even relocated to spa towns entirely. Inscriptions have been found thanking the waters for everything from smoother skin to better dreams to conception of long-hoped-for children. That's not science, that's devotion. Ants. And you floating here, skin soft, limbs loose, the air smelling faintly of thyme and rose, are part of that same lineage. The same trust, the same ritual. Because healing, you realize, is never purely physical. Sometimes it's just being cared for. Touched gently, spoken to kindly, invited into warmth, allowed to rest. The Roman baths weren't perfect. They were political. They were hierarchical. They were, let's be honest, occasionally unsanitary. But they understood people. They understood what it means to need space to be held in something vast, silent, and slow. The same way you've been held tonight. Eventually you rise. Not abruptly. Not because you have to. Just because your body tells you it's ready. You wrap yourself in a towel. Pad barefoot across the stone. The lights are low now. The halls whisper your footsteps back to you with a kind of reverence. And just before you exit through the archway, you glance over your shoulder. The bath behind you is still. The lanterns flicker. A single ripple crosses the water where you are just floating, as if the space is gently letting you go, or saving your shape for later. The steam has faded. The lanterns are out. The corridors are quiet, and the water has settled into a slow, silver stillness. Your towel hangs beside the doorway, now forgotten. The stone is cool beneath your feet, but not unkind. Every surface, the tile, the benches, even the sky overhead feels smooth, worn, familiar. You walk through the empty bathhouse past the places you've seen so many times now. The tepidarium, where the air cradled your shoulders like silk. The caldarium where your pores opened like blossoms in the heat, the frigidarium that shocked you back into yourself. All of it part of a rhythm that's older than most stories. Somewhere behind a shuttered colonnade, water still drips. Somewhere under the floor, stone remembers warmth. And in a quiet corner, a faded mural still watches you with patient, painted eyes. Your thoughts begin to float, light, loose, like steam rising from the surface of the last pool. Let them drift. You've walked through time tonight, through myth and mosaic, through soot and luxury. You've been scrubbed clean by history, then wrapped in its linen arms and rocked gently toward sleep. You don't need to understand every detail. You don't have to remember every name. Just breathe and let the echoes of the Roman baths lull you toward dreams not of empires or emperors, but of warm stone quiet water and the soft hush of rest finally earned. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.